Today's webinar is titled Culturally Responsive Classroom Management, presented by BJ Mary. I'm going to pass it over now to our presenter. BJ, thank you so much for being here with us today to share your knowledge and experience with us, and we look forward to the presentation.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everybody. I hope everybody's doing well today, and thank you for joining us. Over the next little while, we're going to talk about culturally responsive classroom management tools that's going to help you take your program from doing good or even surviving to doing great and thriving, and that is our goal here. So we're going to start looking at some of these things here. First of all, I have no relative financial or non-financial disclosures to share with you, but a little bit about me and what I bring to this presentation is I've spent a little over 22 years in EMS in the fire service, 18 of those as a paramedic, 7 as an educator, as an EMS educator, and that during that time I became an EMS education program director and spent several years there. And I was a part of building one of the largest and successful initial and continuing education programs in the Southeast. And then I do have a master's in education with curriculum instruction. So I've studied a lot of these things, and I took what I'm going to talk to you over the next hour with and put it into my own program. And that is exactly where we went from doing okay and surviving and good to truly thriving. So some of our objectives, we're going to look at just simple classroom management tools, but then how do we rotate that, or how do we kind of move that into a culturally responsive classroom management tool? And what exactly does that mean? And we'll look at all of these things. We're going to understand particularly why community building in your classroom is going to be one of the biggest things to go from doing well to doing excellent in your programs. So first of all, we have to look and see here at what our philosophy of education is. And we have to remember as educators that the philosophy really means a lot to us. And first of all, that the heart of the education is found in both the educator and the student. We try to encourage our students to do their best. We try to encourage our students to study. We make sure that our students are getting everything they need, but truly it begins with us as we enter the classroom. So we have to have this philosophy of the heart of education is found within both of us, the student and the educator. Just like the student, the educator must enter the classroom with an open mind, prepared to learn, prepared to teach, prepared to lead and succeed. We possess these management tools, and so do our students. And we'll look at this in just a moment of why having each of these is so important and taking your program from doing well or doing okay to doing excellent. And lastly, here, success cannot be achieved if either do not always give an all-in effort. If you're having a rough day, if you're having a down day, we have to set that aside. Our students expect us to be excellent every time we walk in the classroom. And conversely, we need to expect our students to be excellent every time they walk in the classroom. When we all walk in with an all-in effort and an opportunity of excellence, that's where we're going to start gaining this excellent opportunity. As educators, we're charged to build and develop intellectual abilities. That's education as a whole. But it goes well beyond that. It goes well beyond just wanting to build intellectual abilities. And whether you're a new educator, a seasoned educator, a program director, a con ed educator, an initial education educator, it goes far beyond intellectual abilities. We have to support our students to the best of our ability, and that is with their intellect and beyond. We know that we find ourselves doing much more than just teaching, and that's where we see this take place. We have to be open-minded. Open-mindedness for both the students and the educators. If you've been doing this for any length of time, you will have already known every class is different. Every class day is different. Every cohort is different. And if we enter the classroom as an educator with a closed mind, we've already failed our students. We have got to walk in with an open mind and the desire to make them a better person when they leave that day. Challenge your students. If you're simply going through the motions and we're simply just teaching them the basics of skills, the basics of intellect, we're failing them. We have got to challenge our students to master skill acquisition and intellect acquisition as well. So we have got to make sure that we're pushing them to be better. The basics do not cut it, and we have got to make sure that we are pushing them to do their absolute best every single day. And that is going for us as well. We must be doing our best as well. Students should leave your programs equipped with practical knowledge and problem-solving skills. The basics really are just that. They're the basics. We need to take that a step further. Let's make sure that we are making mastery the minimum. And when we do that, they're leaving our programs a better person. So one thing that I think is important to have somewhere within your classroom, somewhere within your program walls, is your philosophical statement. This is just as much for your students as it is for you. And this is one that I tried to live by daily, and that I tried to ensure that my students understood, but this is really meant for me. And that's that the success of the educator is not found in the numbers and the statistics, yet it's found in the ability of the student to leave the classroom a changed person. Again, we have got to do more than just give basics. We've got to do more than just give them an understanding. We have got to support them and ensure that they leave your classroom every day a better person. They should leave the classroom a person of integrity and ability, a person of confidence and competence, a person set to change the world one day at a time on what is perceived as one's worst day. So this was mine, but build yours for your program. Each program is different. We'll talk about the differentiations in programs here shortly, but we need to remember that a philosophical statement is who we are and what we are set to do as educators in our profession. So when we look at classroom management, whose responsibility is it? We often think that, it's just yours. It's just yours, the educator. But it goes far beyond that. It's yours. It's mine. It is our students. Our students have a responsibility of classroom management, and we'll look at that. We're teaching adults. So we need to remember that they have a responsibility in this as well. And finally, the program as well. The program has responsibility. Every one of us have a responsibility of classroom management, and we need to take that to task. We need to ensure that our students understand what are their roles. Educators, what are our roles? Program directors, what are our roles? What are the roles of the program? And that's what we're going to cover here over the next little while. So when we look at the true definition of what classroom management is, it's the method of which the instructor uses to create and maintain an environment that is conducive to successful instruction. Fine and well, right? What does that really mean? So when we look at this pictograph here to the right just a bit, we see that it's encompassed by 6 different things. Your materials, how you instruct in your instruction. One of the most important pieces here are policies and procedures, and we'll look at those in detail here in just a moment. Time. That should really say time management, but then behavior and layout. So again, you have this responsibility, your students have this responsibility, your program has this responsibility, and so does your program manager. When we encompass these 6 things, we start to effectively manage our classrooms. When we start to integrate culturally responsive management as well, that's when we go from really good or doing good to doing excellent. So again, we look at these few things. How do we kind of take away from definition and go to what we are as classroom managers? It is using effective discipline. Now, again, we're talking about teaching adults. How do we discipline? Discipline here would be significantly different than teaching children, but nonetheless, discipline needs to be present within your classroom. Next, we see that it's being prepared for class. This isn't just for your students. This is not just for your students. If you walk in the classroom unprepared, oh, I forgot I was teaching this today, I didn't prepare. What do they expect from you at that point? You're supposed to be the educator. You're supposed to be the main leader here. Be prepared. And this is going to lead into effective classroom management. Motivate your students. Motivate them to get out of their comfort zone. You know your students. Get an opportunity to know your students better. Know what they're not comfortable with. Some have some other experiences, some don't. So we've got to continue to motivate them to do better each time they enter the room. Next is providing a safe, comfortable, and comfortable learning environment. This learning environment must be equitable to everyone. Equity in the classroom means that each person who enters your doors every morning, every afternoon, every evening, whenever your class starts, has an opportunity and deserves the same opportunity to be safe and to learn. Everybody deserves an equitable educational opportunity. And that is our job as classroom managers to ensure they get that. It's building a student's self-esteem. This is probably one of the more difficult aspects of being an educator in EMS. When we have these classrooms who have students who thrive, and we have these classrooms who students who aren't doing so well, and we see these differentiations, that's where we have to make sure we're meeting the needs and building the esteem of all. So pairing them with someone who could encourage them versus bring them down is just a simple example of how we can manage these instances. Being creative and imaginative in lessons. The textbook is great. The textbooks give information. The slideshows give information. We have to share the information, but be creative in doing so. Have your students get out of the classroom a little bit. Have them get out of their chairs a little bit. Have your students do some of the teaching. Be imaginative in what you're doing with your lessons, and ensure that we're bringing, realism to the classroom, and that we're making it fun for them. You can only read the PowerPoint so many times before you're just bored and lost, and that's what's happening here. So for you, and why is this different for everyone who's listening today and everyone involved in EMS education around our country? Well, I'm in a new program here. I'm the director of EMS for Sublette County, Wyoming, which is a super small organization in Southwest Wyoming. So it's completely different in the program that I came from in the Southeast. So this hits home more now than ever before. So why is it different? Well, first of all, each one of us as educators have a different teaching style. We talk and learn about learning styles of students, but what about us as teachers? What about us as educators and instructors? We have different styles, and that's okay. That's one of the fun parts about doing this job, is that we all have different styles, and we all have the ability to bring something different to the classroom. We all have different personalities and attitudes. Our attitude sets the forefront of how our classroom is going to go that day. It could set our forefront for how our classroom is going to be for that week, or for the entire class. So we have to mind that. Our personalities are different, which takes us into our teaching styles. How do you approach your classroom? How do you deal with conflict in your classroom? And all these things are coming together now. We all have different student populations. I came from a very populous area in the Southeast to now, being a different area. So we have to gauge our instruction to our student population. That's our goal here. We have to make sure we're doing that. And as an educator, know your population, know your student population, and know their demands. And last but not least, certainly not least, here is every student, every cohort, every class, every program is dynamic. They require different management styles. If they were all the same, if each cohort was the same, boy, wouldn't it be nice? It would be so nice. It would be so much easier, but it really wouldn't be fun. It wouldn't be challenging for us as educators. So we need to ensure that we remember that every student's different, every cohort's different, every class is different, and every program has some differentiations to them. So what are some techniques that you and I can use in the classroom to better manage? First of all is be proactive and not reactive. One of the big issues we see within our profession today is that, we react to things, we become reactive to incidents, we become reactive in the classroom. But if we're proactive, we can prevent some potential issues within the classroom. We can predict, and we know that not everything can be, predicted, but we can certainly be proactive and have a plan in place. And that's addressed right here in the next bullet point, is to have a SMART goal. And if you're not familiar with a SMART goal, we're going to look at that in just a moment. And this is something you should do before every cohort. This is something you should build within the first week of your new cohort or before your cohort, and have this SMART goal and this plan in place prior to the issue arising. That's being proactive, not reactive. Encourage development of all students regardless of culture. That's going back a slide and recognizing who your student cohort is. Moving to the western part of the country from the Southeast was big for me, and recognizing that the culture is significantly different here. So that's on me to learn that. So it's on you as the educator to learn who your cohorts are and how that you can meet their needs. Then be aware of the cultural differences and be prepared to deal with those. That can be addressed as you go, but we would prefer that you be proactive. That's going to help you manage your classrooms just a touch better and go from really good or good and surviving to great and thriving. Deal with disruptive behaviors, but also manage to minimize off-task, non-disruptive behaviors, right? So we shouldn't have to talk about behavior concerns in adult education, but if you've done this for any more than one classroom session, you've done it. Make sure you're addressing these. If we go back to equitable educational opportunity, someone with a disruptive behavior or, an off-task issue, we have got to address that because that starts to break the equity within the classroom. Teaching students to manage their own behaviors. Again, your diverse classroom should address this, but who are we teaching today? We're seeing the generational shift in education in EMS. So we're seeing the younger folks who were in high school during COVID, and we're seeing these things to where they haven't spent as much time in the classroom as previously seen. So these are things that we may need to address. And yes, it is your responsibility as the adult educator to do so. Students learn to be on task and engage in the learning activities you have planned for them. Plans matter. When we talk about adults in education, they have responsibility and they need to know what it is that they're doing and why they're doing it. So we have to make sure that we're addressing this for our students. Focus your attention on entire classrooms. That's an obvious thing, but also set aside time to have that one-on-one time when needed as well. And those talk over your students. It's kind of worthless at that point. So make sure that you're managing your classroom to ensure that everybody is getting an equitable opportunity. Use the softer voice. The students must listen to what you are saying. I have a hard time with this as I'm a loud instructor and a loud educator, but make sure you have their attention. This is all going back into the equity aspect here. Direct your instruction so the students know what's going on. Again, adults almost require the basic knowledge of the who, what, when, where, and why of what's going on in the classroom. And that is our responsibility to share with them. Monitor groups of students to check progress. One thing that I find, and I've found previously, that helps tremendously are small group study opportunities and small group skill acquisition. Problem here is, as with any small group, they tend to get off task. Our job as the educator is to monitor these small groups and to get them on task to ensure that they're getting out of what they need. Move around the classroom. This is any student that's ever taken my class would shake their head tremendously. Yes. Move around the classroom, sitting behind a lecturer in a podium, a desk, sitting in a chair. For a little while it's okay, but make sure that you're up. Make sure that you're engaging. It also gives your students an opportunity to say, oh, they actually really care about what's going on. We go back to, what's our persona and what do we bring to the classroom? This also now makes sure that, the student's paying attention. We've done it before and we recognize, oh, there's a student that looks up immediately when you walk up. Well, maybe you just redirected them back to the lesson. Give students nonverbal cues. Our body language is tremendous here. And I know it almost sounds like we're talking about having to teach children, but these are adult education cues that are going to ensure that you take your classroom from good to great. So use these nonverbal cues and engage low profile intervention of disruptions. Having the discussion on a break, make sure you stop the issue right now to ensure equitable opportunity, but at your next break during the class, have a conversation with that student. Let them know what's going on, what your concerns are, and address those. And again, we just spoke about this a couple of slides ago. Ensure that your classroom is comfortable and safe. That's what's ensuring that you have that equitable opportunity. So we talked a bit about the SMART goal here just a few minutes ago. I mentioned of it. And if you're not familiar with this, a quick Google search will take you to SMART goals. And it's very simple. It's taking us to specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound goals. And these are things that you should address preferably before your cohort. But if you don't know who your cohort's going to be, you're not sure what the population is going to be like, address it in the first week. And this is for you to have on file for yourself. Keep close, but specific. State exactly what you want to accomplish. The who, what, when, where, and why. This is already done and usually done within your syllabi. and within your class goals here. Make them measurable, though. How will you demonstrate and evaluate the extent to which goals have been met? If this is simply by addressing it by grades or pass percentages, I would challenge you to take that and make it into a life-changing experience. Yes, pass percentages matter, but more so making sure that our students are having an equitable opportunity and mastering these skills. Achievable stretch and challenging goals within the ability to achieve outcomes, certainly important, relevant. Again, make sure your goals are relevant to your program and the key responsibilities of your program. And then time bound, set one or more target dates, the by when to guide your goal to successful and timely completion. These are also important and are going to help you meet your goals throughout the classroom. This, for me, was a game changer. We all know, and I would typically say within quotations, right, that student. The BIP plan or the behavioral intervention plan, oftentimes seen in childhood education, should be prepared for you in adult education. We are all familiar with that student who may not necessarily just be a behavior concern, but they're creating an unequitable opportunity for the rest of your cohort. Have this plan in place. So what are the events or the setting events? What are your predictors? Within the first week of your classes, you typically know what predictors are of each of your students. So what is our desired behavior, problem behavior, and alternative behavior? So if we look here at desired behavior, you should share that with your students on day one. If you don't set your expectations within your classroom, you're never going to manage it appropriately. Set the desired expectations, desired behaviors, and then what are the consequences? They need to know this. So if they can't meet those desired behaviors, they come down here into the next bullet points or the lines below. And what is the problem behavior and how are you as the educator going to mind it? And that's set for your programs. Set it at the program level and then address it with each cohort going forward. These BIP plans or these behavior intervention plans will save you tremendously and will help you find a lot of things out moving forward and will certainly help you be proactive instead of reactive. So here we see, we're just going to talk about a couple more effective classroom management tools here and looking at social and emotional learning. Adults we're all adults here, so let's be real, right? We have lives outside of the classroom. We have lives outside of the profession. So we start introducing social and emotional learning as well. So these provide an opportunity or an environment that supports academic, social, and emotional learning. We have to support our students. We have to make sure that we're meeting their needs. So we look at self-awareness, responsibility, and decision-making, relationship skills, social awareness, and finally self-management. And each of these 5, outliers here are important for good management within an adult classroom. And when we look at self-awareness, we make sure that, we see that we recognize everyone has emotion and they're addressing these. We need to recognize as adult educators that, adults have decision-making capability. They have that responsibility and decision-making capability. They're going to use ethical decision-making. They're going to use all of these things. So we just need to pay attention there. Relationship skills, they bring these to the classroom and they're so important to the students that we have to be able to manage these as well. Social awareness is kind of self-explanatory here. And then self-management. We sometimes, depending on where our age population is in our cohort, we may need to address some of these things as well, looking there. Possess a structured and organized environment where the student can focus on the tasks at hand. How does your classroom appear? What's in your classroom? What can, keep your students on task? What keeps your students away from achieving tasks within the classroom? So this is our responsibility as an effective management tool that we structure our classroom appropriately, that we organize our environment, and that we try to remove any outliers that could take them away from where they need to be. Further, effective classroom management ensures that there's trust among the student-instructor relationship. I cannot express to you the importance of the trust of the student-instructor relationship. The student needs to be able to trust you that they can come talk to you about things involving class. And as you build that, they're going to trust you as much to come talk to you about things that are outside of the classroom as well. Beware of nonverbals. Greet your students. If you meet in the morning, if you meet in the evening, greet your students. Let them see that you're there for an educational opportunity, and let them know that you care. Greet them, say hello, good morning, good evening. Just let them know that you're there. Build the community. And lastly, confer with your students. This one was a huge change for me when I first became an educator. On breaks, lunches, these things, I would separate myself from the students, and we were doing okay. When I started having lunch with the students, I started conversing with them. I getting to learn who they are more so outside of the classroom. We built this trust. We started to increase the trust of the student-instructor relationship, and that's where we started seeing the uptick in successes, not just in statistics, but in building competent providers outside of the classroom. Effective classroom management is going to foster positive motivation and engagement for student success. So we see this pie here, and we look at positive engagement, negative motivation, and negative engagement, positive engagement, positive motivation. So let's look at engagement first. Positive engagement, persistence, planning, task management. This is your responsibility. If you don't plan your class ahead, you're never going to meet task management. So if we look at the negative engagements here, that's self-sabotage. We are failing our students immediately if we don't plan a task management tool before walking in. That's going to lead to disengagement. When you have disengagement in the classroom, you now have a failing classroom. Now let's move to the motivation. Positive motivation, self-behavior, or self-belief, learning focus, valuing. Self-belief is one of the most powerful things. And we all know those students who struggle with self-belief. Well, this also starts with you, the educator, right? So ensuring that we have these things in place is super important for a positive motivational opportunity, because conversely, we see here the negative motivation leads to anxiety, failure avoidance, and then uncertain control. Test anxiety is ridden within the EMS classroom. So we need to make sure that we try to eliminate that to the best of our ability, but more so the failure avoidance. And what is failure avoidance alluding to here is that if we don't build a positive motivational skill within ourselves and our students, when they begin to fail, they're just simply going to go. They're not going to come to you for help. They're going to avoid the fact that they're even failing. And now they either exit the program on their own free will or on the fact that they failed out of the program. Continuing here with effective classroom management, reduce and keeps disruption to a minimum. I am a big time educator when it comes to small group discussion during the classroom. I think it's important to start the day off of the class off with a small group discussion, but that's your responsibility to set the tone for that. Make sure we're not disrupting that and making sure that we're meeting those needs. So let's look at the student responsibility. We've looked at some of the classroom management techniques that are going to take you from good to great. But what about student ownership, the student-centered approach? Adult students value leadership. If you are not a leader within your program, within your classroom, and within your day with your students, they don't trust you. They don't believe in your leadership style, and that's when we start to lose them. We have to be forward, and we have to lead them to success. They desire that, and they need that. Allow students to become more engaged and motivated. That this aids in building life skills. Yes, it is absolutely your responsibility to build life skills. That is our responsibility as educators. Self-discipline, problem-solving, decision-making, and independent thinking. These 4 things are what make an autonomous EMS clinician. If they have the self-discipline that you have built them in, the problem-solving skills that you're building them with, the decision-making capacity that you're building them with, and independent thinking, you have now built an autonomous, successful EMS clinician, someone that can go out and be a difference maker for your service. Failure to encourage student ownership has potential to have negative effects on success as well. You know, if we're not encouraging them to build these desires and these life skills, there's no way they're going to pass the test. But there's so much more to this profession than the test that we all know. They're never going to be a successful clinician. So ensure that you're making these four things a part of your everyday goal for your students is to help them build their life skills. That is certainly a part of our goal and our responsibility. Students have choices. Students have choices for sure. Allow for increased engagement and student autonomy. We're talking about adult education here. They all have autonomy already. They all have this desire and this need to take into the responsibility of their education. Allow them to have it. Encourage them, support them, love them, teach them, but allow them to have that autonomy as well. Allow for students to choose how they will learn the material. A lot of us who have been doing this for a long time, we didn't have the choice of an e-text or having the slides in front of us versus a softback textbook, a hardback textbook. What do they need to learn? They know themselves better. Don't force upon them what's not going to help them learn. Force upon them, aid into them what is going to help them be successful in your classroom, but far beyond your classroom as well. Student choice also allows for increased excitement about topics and curriculum. We know we have to meet the minimums, right? But what else do they need? What do they need from you? What do they need from the textbook? What do they need from your classroom? What can we do to meet their needs and desires? Finally, allows for student empowerment. When our students are autonomous, when our students start seeking success and excellence, our students feel empowered. And an empowered student is a successful student. They have to have that power to know what they need to be successful. Now, I've talked a couple of times about community within the classroom, and this is where we start looking at the cultural responsiveness here. Community within your classroom. Set aside a time to build this within your classroom. It's so important. It's going to foster connectedness. When you have connectedness amongst your students, it builds trust amongst your students. When you build trust amongst your students, you have camaraderie. When you have camaraderie, it elicits comfortability. And when we have comfortability within the classroom, your students will ask questions. And one of my favorite statements before a student asks a question is, this is probably a stupid question. Well, that means that you have now built community and they're comfortable enough to ask what they believe is a stupid question. And is there such thing as a stupid question? No. Listen to them. Maybe they need it broke down in a different way. That's our job as educators. We're going to come back to community as well here in just a few minutes to look a little bit more into it, but it's one of those things that I want to touch on early. Conflict resolution. If you've never had conflict in your classroom, I need to know where you're teaching because you're doing something spectacular and that's amazing, but conflict is going to occur. Remind students that conflict resolution is a life skill and it's one that you should be building within them. And they're going to need it professionally anyway. So let's make sure that we are ensuring that we're building this. Encourage open mindedness in your discussions, and this is going to help with conflict resolution. And when we do have a conflict come up with your classroom, facilitate the interaction. They're adults, right? Allow them to build this life skill, share this with them. They need to come to a compromise. They need to collaborate, accommodate, and avoidance if necessary, but facilitate them. It's a part of the learning skill. Maybe they never had conflict resolution taught to them before. So when we look at our student-centered approaches here, we have a couple of consequences that are important. And we'll address both of them quickly here, natural versus logical. Our natural consequences are results of planned and unplanned behaviors. They're a direct result of the students' actions themselves. So when we come over here to logical, it's intentional planned by the instructor. It's things that you add in here. What's related, what's respectful, and what's reasonable for your students. So being reasonable is not providing consequences for students' inappropriate behavior. Being respectful, right? Having the consequences given with empathy. We need to care about our students. We understand that some can be super difficult, but we have to love them nonetheless, and we have to encourage them to start building into successful EMS clinicians. There's so much more to being an EMS clinician than just getting an education. That's why we have to have some of these other things. So culturally responsive classroom management in and of itself is the use of cultural awareness to guide management decisions about the classroom. Look around your classroom, get to know your students, know who is there. And now we start looking into what are their backgrounds, what are their cultures, what are their home lives. You don't get this information by taking your lunch alone. You don't get this information by hiding in your office during a break. You get this by getting to know who they are as people. Get to know their learning styles, previous life experiences. We'll talk about previous life experiences and how that's going to take your program to a whole new level. But these things are what we are going to take as culturally responsive classroom management. We're going to integrate them by getting to know our students, and we are going to win a successful classroom. We're going to have strategies. We have 7 strategies here to look at. Set your clear expectations from the beginning. Day 1, minute 1, your expectations need to be clear to your students. If they don't know what their expectations are, you're going to have a disaster from day 1. You can't set the expectation on day 2, 3, 4, 5. Day 1, minute 1. Set a positive tone. Build a receptive, caring, appreciative classroom community. Any of my students who have ever taken any of my classes, last 2 things: thank you, I love you, have a great day. Just build that opportunity for them. Build that receptive, caring community for them. Appreciate and embrace cultural diversity. Love everybody. You should be doing this anyway. Equitable, diversified classrooms are a winning classroom. Take this material and help us learn each other. Take the time to get to know your students. We already spoke on that. Involve their families in a positive way. Families, right? We want to build a community, build a family. We always preach upon we are a family in this profession. Let's build that a little bit more. Let's involve their families. Have a family day every few weeks, every month, every quarter, depending on how your programs run. Lastly, in our strategies, provide continuous support. One of the most powerful things to me that proved to me that this works is today, I still have students from 5 years ago that call just to say hi and say, hey, I need help with this. That is how I knew I took this from good to great. That cultural responsiveness and providing continuous support, without a doubt, take your classroom to a whole new way. So again, I'm just going to kind of quickly go through these because we spoke about them briefly here already, but set clear expectations from day 1. It should be in your syllabus. They should have a copy of it. Make sure that they know what your expectations are. And the last bullet point here is just as important, if not more important. Ask your students when you give them their expectations, what are their expectations of you? What do they want from you? What do they want from the program? That way you know how to meet their expectations. Setting your positive tone. Be welcome. That's that simple, that simplistic, good morning, how are you? You set the tone for the day. Consider an asset-based classroom management style. Let them know that they are your biggest assets. And we'll talk about that here in just a few minutes as well. Where is our assets? Your attitude at the beginning of the class is going to set the tone for the rest of the class. So just make sure that you're paying attention to that. Ask for feedback. So we're looking here at the appreciative classroom community. Ask for feedback. What do they need from you? What do they want from you? How are you doing? Be bold in the fact that you may not be doing as good as you think, but you'll never know until you ask your students. Allow your students time to learn about each other as well. And that's in building this community we keep speaking of. Embrace the culture. Celebrate everybody. Be inclusive, regardless of culture, gender, religion, nationality. These are things we're already doing, but you need to go a step further, folks. You need to encourage this inclusiveness. You need to encourage people to love everybody. You need to encourage them to step outside of their comfort zones because of where they came from. They may be a little bit afraid of where they're going with this. So we need to make sure that we are encouraging this inclusiveness. Take the time to get to know your students. Know what your students' interests are. We already talked about this a little bit, but we need to know what our students' interests are. What is it that they want from us? What is it they want from the program? Know where your students are from. That could be geographically, that could be culturally. Nonetheless, we should know who they are and what's going on. Know what their professional and educational backgrounds are, but also know what their professional and educational goals are. We've thought about an EMT student classroom. Do they have a goal to go to paramedic school? What are their goals? We should start that encouragement from day one. Find out what life experiences they have. Your students' life experiences are going to change your classroom. Your students' life experiences might help the one student that you cannot figure out a way to teach, somebody else might be able to. We briefly spoke about involving their families already. Adults have responsibility outside the classroom. We already understand that. They have spouses, they have children, they have responsibility. Be considerate of the familial obligations. I know that we have minimums that we must meet as far as classroom hours. I'm not knocking that at all, but you need to be considerate of obligations. We need to be, we need to set these tones for them, and we need to help them tremendously with that, because that is a big stressor for these folks. And then consider having your family day. Lastly, providing continuous support for your folks, love, encouragement, challenge them, be available for them, and support them. We've got to build a culture of hope, folks. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Build a culture of hope for your students. It builds a positive, equitable opportunity for each student to learn. It's able to gain views from everyone. We always have that student that sits over in the corner in the back, sometimes in the front, they may, but they don't share much. They're scared about their background, or they're nervous about being in a new group of people. This is our responsibility to encourage them that they have a vision and a voice. Allow them to voice their visions, allow them to start to share who they are, and we start sharing a culture of hope. If you can spark a little bit of hope or a culture of hope in one person, you're going to start to spark that culture of hope in your entire classroom. Classroom meetings, just briefly here talking and talking amongst these, we spoke about building the trust amongst the adults in your classroom. Even though they're adults, they're going to need a little bit of a encouragement and a little bit of a push towards the safeness and the equity there. So make sure that you have a safe classroom to where it's okay to say something that doesn't really make sense, as far as asking a question, or if we don't understand, allow them to understand that that's okay. Create a sense of belonging. That's so important. Inclusiveness and belonging. If everyone in your classroom feels welcomed, loved, respected, you've now created an inclusive classroom, regardless of where they came from, regardless of what they believe, and regardless of what they look like. So your students are your biggest assets in your educational program. Use them. Why do we fail to use our students in the classroom? We feel that we just have to stand there and educate them. We have to teach. No, use them to your advantage. Without having your students, your biggest asset, you don't have a classroom full of people. You don't have a classroom full of people. You don't have a program. You don't have a program, folks. We don't have a job. So we got to make sure that we're using our biggest assets to our advantage. So how do we do that? We need to remember that why adults seek education. Well, professional improvement, financial gain, personal enrichment, and religious reasons are four of the topmost reasons adults seek education. When we look at these top three, we are hitting the EMS classroom. They're looking for professional improvement. They're looking to get a job or advance in their profession, going from a basic level to an advanced level clinician. And then a lot of them do this for personal enrichment. These are so important that we have to remember this is where we set the line of why they're seeking this. And now we have to use our biggest assets. So when we look at Knoll's theory of andragogy here, and this is something that most of us are familiar with, we just don't realize it. The readiness to learn, the orientation of learning, the motivation to learn, reason to learn, self-concept, and experience. I'm going to come over here to experience last because that's what we're talking about, right? They're our biggest assets, our students, so we want to make sure that we're using their experiences. But readiness to learn, if we go back just a slide real quick, we see that, they have these needs, these desires. So once they walk into your classroom, they're already ready. We have to orient them to the classroom. We need to get them comfortable in the classroom. It's our job to motivate them, and they walk in with a reason to learn. We need to continue to encourage them to learn. Yes, this is all self-concept, but it's your responsibility as the educator. The experience here. As we see here with the experience, we have to make sure that we use their past experiences to our advantage. And we do this by a few different ways. We look at, first of all, they possess life experience to apply to new learning. You can do this in your classroom. One of the easiest ways I've learned to use this is in shock. You take the body and you make it a fire truck. You take the body, you make it an HVAC unit, or what have you. But you got to apply it to their experiences. You can help them there. They have a diverse experience and knowledge about life. Even your younger students, listen to them. You can adapt your classroom to their experiences. And that's how you're going to take these students from good to great. That's how you're going to take your program from good to great. They have in-depth, ingrained ideas. Listen to them. I challenge you from today on as an instructor, as an educator, learn as much from your students as your students learn from you. That's building a successful classroom. They have this readiness to learn that we already spoke about, right? They want to learn things that are relevant to their life. Explain to them how it's relevant to them. Encourage them why it's relevant to them. Aid them in envisioning the value of meaningful education. Is your program just surviving today, getting through? Are you encouraging your students of why this is meaningful to them, how and why and what they're going to do when they leave your classroom to make a difference in someone's life? That's where we come in here. That's where we start making the differences here. Orientation to learning, again, adults are engaged by learning that that is problem-centered and practical. Our folks need to know what they're doing. They need to be oriented to what's going on, the why behind it, right? We all oftentimes as parents get a little irritated, if you will, with the kids when they say, well, why? Well, they need to know why. That's a learning opportunity for them. And if your student asks why more than twice, change the way you're explaining it. If they ask it more than 4 times why and they're not understanding, find someone in the classroom with enough experience in life that can break it down for them. And that might be your game changer for you right there. Finally, here in orientation to learning, the students tend to put an emphasis and focus on subjects that's most useful to them. If you think back to some of your previous classrooms, if you've had military folks in your classroom, they tend to kind of, shade a little bit more towards the trauma sections. Well, that's where they have experience, right? That's what they, at least in their minds, associate to most important. So that's the emphasis for them. Self-concept. Again, adults tend to be self-directed. Adults have that responsibility to want to go and want to learn. We are independent. Independent learning can work, but we have to encourage them. They prefer to find their own way. But you need to guide them in their way to manage their learning, because maybe it's been 15 years since they've been out of the classroom. The classroom has changed tremendously in 15 years. Manage them and allow them to be independent, but guide them in the process. That's where loving them and encouraging them comes into play. They possess the ability to make their own decisions as well. I submit to you, listen to them and what their decisions are. They may have a reason. Remember, our views are different. That's the equitable and diversified classroom we're speaking of, and being culturally responsive for these folks. The motivation here, adults are motivated by several value and are very, very value driven. They want to be there. They want to know why they're there as well. They want job satisfaction. One of the best things is to create a little bit of drive in your classroom. Allow them to, hey, let's see who can do the highest on this or the best at that. Create some competition. They need that satisfaction. They want their increased self-esteem, better quality of life, and they're going to get this through education. Education is the basis of all quality of life, and we should be encouraging this. And they want this personal growth. Again, this is where we get so helpful here for these folks. Finally, students helping students. They can explain from different life experiences. Again, if a student asks why more than twice, once they get to twice and why, explain it a different way. If they get to a fourth time and you've explained it different ways, find somebody else to explain it to them. If it's another student, excellent. You're using your biggest asset at that point. They can also explain from different cultural backgrounds. Remember, we all have different cultural backgrounds, so we need to remember these things. And then hearing the same theory from a different point of view. I learned several years ago in my education endeavor is that just because I know it this way doesn't mean everybody's going to know it that way. Doesn't mean they're going to learn it that way. So that's where opening the classroom, making it safe, making it equitable and diversified allows them to use their cultural backgrounds and their cultural diversity to aid you as the educator. Community, we've talked about it. We're talking about it one more time here. The classroom program, the EMT program is to be safe, adequate, and a fair learning environment for all students. It has to be equitable. Without an equitable classroom, you don't have a program that's thriving at all. You have one that's barely surviving. Change the way you're doing it and ensure that you're building them up. These students expected to have the utmost respect for themselves, each other, instructors, and the profession always. Share this with your students. But educators that submit, share this with yourselves too. So change the word student educator. Each educator is expected to have the utmost respect for themselves, each other, and students, and the profession always. And 100% all-in attitude expected each day you report to class. In return for your respect and effort, the instructors of the program will abide by the program's mission statement. This is our job. We build this community. We build a diversified and equitable classroom, and your program now goes from good to great. When we build a classroom that has cultural diversity and a community of safety within it, your program will start to thrive today. So we see here the educational experience, and this is all from the community as well. Leadership from the program's instructors is imperative to success in the program, and self-control and stress management are two imperative traits as an educator and leader within our classroom. So we see we have cognitive presence, teaching presence, and social presence, and then we get down to a little bit smaller here to supporting discourse, selecting content, setting climate, all comes to the educational experience. Our students depend on us. Can they do it alone? Most of them, absolutely not. So we give them a good educational experience to a diversified classroom, and we start to win. As an adult educator, it's imperative to students in the classroom and program understand that students have a family life away from the classroom. I stress to my students that this is tough, right? But it's integral for them to take time for themselves and their family. A lot of them are at the point that, I gotta focus on this class, especially when we look at the paramedic programs. Encourage your students to take a moment for themselves. Encourage your students to take a little bit of time for their families. It's so important for them to have that, because who is really at home encouraging them every day? Their families. It's so important for us to continue to do that. Encourage fellowship amongst students and their families as well. Family days are so special. They allow we get to see who's who, we get to know families and things like that. Harboring a family-like classroom while maintaining the rigor and militaristic style of a recruit program is important, depending on what type of program you're teaching in today. And we see mentorship here. It's our job as the educator to be a mentor, but conversely, it's the responsibility of each student to mentor each other as well. So that's going to help you in building community. And we see here having the ability to recognize those who lack in faith and confidence in their ability to learn and perform is important. Within a safe community and an equitable classroom, not only you're going to notice this, but the students who are already thriving are going to notice this, and they are going to start building up your classroom. They're going to aid you in your biggest assets are going to aid you in building a successful, thriving program. But it cannot stop there. You must take it further and encourage them, push them, and lead them to a successful education. You got to get out of your comfort zone. We've got to get in the desire of building an equitable and diversified classroom and build a community that's safe for everybody to learn. When you start implementing the things of this program, of the culturally responsive classroom management, you will see your program go from doing okay or surviving to thriving and great. So I thank you guys so much for being here today.